you haven't met me before, I'm Jeff Skipper, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this is now the 5th masterclass on the topic of leading change in what are some really different times we're experiencing. So we're all facing change to some degree. How do we navigate it? This series is intended to take you beyond conventional thinking. I hope you'll get some of that today. My intention is to be very practical. We'll run for 30 minutes and we'll have time for questions at the end. And as always, this is being recorded and I will post it afterwards. So we'll dig in. So I'm finding I get a good response to having a bit of a laugh break on my calls. So I'll give you a moment to process that. So this is a particularly near and dear cartoon for me because I not only find it humorous, but also I've seen so many change leaders lead with the premise that we are planning for resistance. I've seen it in posts, I've seen it in articles, and I find it quite disturbing because what we're preparing for, what we announce that we're seeing as a priority affects the way we approach things. So I'd much rather be continually communicating that I'm planning for success, I'm planning for adoption, I'm planning for engagement. Resistance, yes, it is going to occur. We can't avoid the fact that people come with different perspectives and not everyone buys in right away. But I'm not planning for that from the outset. In fact, I'd rather be reactive to it as it comes out and instead just encourage people to engage. So something that resonates for me. So you may have had a conversation like this at some point. We need you to help make this change happen. And really good to start out by meeting with leadership. When can I do that? Well, that would be tough. Most of them work out of the office. It's becoming more common these days. Okay, fine. Well, let me shadow a few employees so I understand their perspective, where they're coming from, what they encounter on a daily basis. That could be an issue too because our workforce is entirely dispersed. Most of them work from home, which leaves us wondering, how do we tackle this when we want to lead change? The reality is we recognize change is based on trust. If I'm going to take a step into an area that I'm not familiar with, into an unknown, ask me to do something I've not done before, I'm trusting that you're going to support me, you're going to help me through it, that it's going to be safe in some way, whether it's physically safe or psychologically safe to get engaged. And I'm doing that based on our relationship. We've got some history, I trust you, or you've demonstrated credibility. And we're just acknowledging the fact it's much harder to build those relationships when we're working at a distance. So as we're needing to influence people and convey a direction without a relationship, people are just hearing words and may not necessarily buy in. When we meet with individuals at a distance, it can feel like we're blindfolded. We're lacking that common ground for communication, whether it's the visual cues or that we understand each other's language, where we're coming from, or we have shared interests. When I've got those visual cues, when we've got some history, there are more things I can build upon and refer to in order to make a connection. So I'm going to walk you through 2 case studies of distance-based change and what I did around that, and help you hopefully today in how you might navigate that with our current conditions. So first client I want to reference is the Salvation Army. I've been doing work with them now for about 4 years, a variety of projects. But several years ago, we were working on the launch of some enterprise-wide software in the area of human resources. And this was going to bring fantastic capabilities and benefits to those leaders at the front line and also employees right across the nation. So positive overall. I had regular contact with the sponsor and implementation team, so that was certainly a benefit. But when you looked at the stakeholders, the leaders who'd be using it, the employees who'd be impacted, they're all across the country in little places, all the way up to the north, the farthest reaches of Newfoundland. How do you get to them? How do you influence them towards change? Several things. One, this wasn't the first thing, but it was significant. We developed a brand. So I came to the project, said, we need something that symbolizes what we're doing. The tool being rolled out was called UltiPro. So UP was a common short form for that, and up sounded like a good direction to be moving. So I encapsulated that in a very simple PowerPoint render diagram, which looks nothing like the green box you see on the page right now. Instead, a graphic designer saw what I created and said, I think we can do better, and ta-da, here it is. So we had a brand. and we established a communication cadence. So at the beginning, early stage, we probably were communicating monthly, giving people a heads up, here's what's coming, starting to introduce the significance of the change and the benefits. And of course that ramped up as we got closer to go live. We were more frequent in our communication, wanting to keep people informed. But the main point is cadence means regular. So whether it was monthly or bi-weekly or weekly, by the time we were heading towards go live, they can anticipate and predict when those communications would come. And if you read my newsletter this week around the importance of control, this is an important way of giving people control when they feel like change is upending the way that they work. Communication that's regular, that gives them answers, puts control back in their hands because they can begin to predict what the future will look like. We were able to run a roadshow. So myself with another executive went across Canada and met in almost every province and invited people to come in from their various offices and see a demo, have their questions answered. We talked to them about the change. And showing up personally obviously makes a big difference. We couldn't get to everyone, but having that presence and leaders coming out and making contact has a major impact. I know when we had the wildfires up in Fort McMurray, the fact that some executives immediately got on a plane, went up there and spent time, days with those folks who were displaced, had a major impact, and those stories continue to be shared today. Credibility boosters. So beyond just showing up, because that helps boost credibility, we did some other things. So we compared our implementation of the software to what others had done. So during our meetings, we referenced the fact that this has been implemented by Subway Sub. This has been implemented by TJ Maxx, who owns Winners. These are brands you recognize. Now note the picture on the top right. This is typical Salvation Army brass band playing outdoors in the summertime. And the final comparison we made was, we said this has been implemented by Yamaha. Now, what you might not recognize is Yamaha not only makes motorcycles, they make brass instruments. So for the audience, that resonated quite powerfully. Out of the three that we referenced, that would have had the biggest impact. It creates reassurance. It builds trust in where we're going as an organization in implementing this change. So consider, what are the influencers that you can bring to bear? What are the comparisons that you can leverage to help build trust, even if you can't reach out and touch someone? We built a super user network. I called it UCAN for UltiPro Change Agent Network. So a positive acronym. And we phrased it as an investment. So we didn't ask managers to nominate people or get their sign off. We just said it's like a subscription list. If you want to be part of this UCAN network, we're going to give you additional training. We're going to give you previews. You're going to have an opportunity to weigh in on changes we're making that are coming. So it was an opportunity for them all around. And folks did sign up. So we ran a lot of calls, not only with the Change Agent Network, so we were getting our messaging out there through these folks, which we couldn't meet with directly, but they would carry our message board, but also managers. And those were manager dedicated calls. So a note went out to all folks who had people reporting to them to say, come, we'll give you an update, which meant recapping some of the communications that we know not everyone was reading, and then offer to answer any questions they had. So they would often come in an environment where they didn't need to worry about being embarrassed by asking a basic question in front of their employees. They could get informed. That's critical, because the worst thing that can happen is an employee goes to a manager and says, hey, we know this thing's coming, I have a question, and the manager says, I have no idea. No one's told me, I don't know what's happening. That's a big credibility hit. So we want to avoid that. Very important to have your managers on board and loaded up, equipped, so they can be your ambassadors. And finally, that personal support, making contact. When we hit go live with this particular change, we had a lot of issues, and so a lot of support calls came in. We had a support team, but everyone joined in. So the project manager was answering calls for support. I was answering calls for support. We worked evenings, we worked weekends, and individuals got callbacks from, hi, I'm Jeff, I'm the change lead on this project, and I know you've got a question, I've got an answer for you, let's work it through together. So that kind of personal attention, again, will ripple through the organization, and where they may be feeling pain about how the change is going, at least they recognize people are doing their best to provide support. Those tend to spread in the form of stories. Now we're to Quest. This is a major software firm based out of the States, but international. That's their website in the top right. So for them, we're working on an enterprise-wide software launch in CRM, so customer relationship management. Minimal client contact. So this is actually the scenario where I said, looking forward to meeting your leadership. And they said, yeah, that's going to be tough. Not only that, we're a remote culture. They hire skills where they find them. So most individuals, I would say, work outside of an office area. They work out of their homes and rarely come on site. And then, of course, with the pandemic going on, one of the primary ways I connect with users is during user acceptance testing, UAT, and that's not going to happen. So what do? So leadership team interviews, I spend a lot more time building rapport. So where I might dive into my interview guide, I'll take longer to just ask, how are you doing? And share a bit about something I've been up to or something that occurred today, which might be of interest. I ran a workshop with a new audience a couple weeks ago, 2-hour-long workshop. We spent 15 to 20 minutes, so a significant portion of that workshop dedicated to a round table online using Zoom, where I invited them to tell me what they were looking for, and then second, ask a question of one of your peers as you look at their background. So you observe where they're sitting, what's in their home, what interests you, and that was a lot of fun. That created a really positive tone for the workshop. So these activities that enable us to reveal a bit about ourselves, build rapport, build the bridges we require for relationships to form, and the trust aspect needed to embrace change. Running updates and demos seems obvious, but I'll take anything. So I commonly go to leaders and say, when's your next huddle? When's your next town hall? When are you meeting people? And can I get some time? They'll ask, how much do you need? So I'll say, 20 minutes is optimal, but I'll take whatever you have. I always say, whatever you can give me, I'll take it. If it's 10 minutes, I'm good. If it's 5 minutes, I'm good. If it's 5 minutes, I go in, give a couple updates from the communications that have been sent out, and then open Q&A. And I find as the questions start rolling in, the leader always gives me extra time anyways because they see the value in what's happening. So updates, demos, find ways to show up, even if it's a fly on the wall. Okay, you have no time for me, no problem. Can I sit in your next meeting just to listen? I'll be on mute, but it helps me to hear the language, hear what the priorities are, so when I'm communicating, when I'm reaching out, I can connect on a more personal basis with individuals. The branding aspect again. So Quest is listed all their benefits with what they were rolling out. And one of the taglines was, we're moving from 3 pieces of software to 1. We are getting to 1. So I set that to a graphic designer on Fiverr.com. And for the price of $25, I received this brand, and it's beautiful. It went on everything, used it on all our presentations. And now in that reality of our inboxes are full, you can now easily find what are the communications related to the project. We have our tagline in the subject, and then we have the logo in our messaging, so they can immediately recognize what they're looking at. Before I go on, Creative Comps, the bottom left, quote to cash newsflash, that was something I created using a logo generator online, cost me nothing, and that became the top line logo for our newsletters going out after go live. And people like that say, oh, that looks cool, it's modern. It caught their eye. And again, they could pick that out of their inbox. Respond personally to every question. I saw one organization do this where they asked for suggestions and top leadership respond to every single one. I thought, wow, that's very impressive, sends a strong message. Recently, I had a client say, this is something we'd like to do with our employees. We want to call every single one of them who's embracing this work from home change, whether they want to or not, and see how they're doing. And they asked, how should we announce this to the organization? I said, don't announce it at all. Just start calling, because once you make a couple of those calls coming out of the leadership body, people are going to talk amongst themselves. Hey, did you get a call from so-and-so? Yeah, just call to see how I was doing. That's never happened before. So Doing it differently signals that we're trying to implement a change. It catches people's attention. And of course, again, responding personally builds us up in terms of credibility. Reach out for insights. At Quest, I have a number of people who are responsible for certain functions. I'll ask them, what are you hearing? Ear to the ground, what's the buzz? How are people responding to the communications going out? Are they even reading them? And then secondarily, connect me with a few people that I might have a conversation with, so I can give them a shout and say, you know, what are you reading? Is it coming through? What interests you from what you see? What are the challenges you'd anticipate? And I can cover off quite a bit in 5 to 10 minutes, and it provides fantastic insight for my communications. I mentioned that we will not be running user acceptance testing physically together, but there will be testing. Now, at Quest, they're great. They give me time to sit in and ask questions of the folks and say, from your testing so far, what really surprised you? What do you think is going to be daunting to users, or what's going to be confusing? So that, again, I can handle that within training, communications, how I roll things out. But if you're not getting that kind of opportunity, then volunteer to help out with logistics. So, you know what, I'd like to help organize these sessions, make sure the right people are there. And then I also will connect with leadership and say, hey, if they're coming together or even virtually, we want you to make an appearance at this point in time. It's to say thank you for what people are doing, and then ask them questions, because you want to know how well this is going to go when you roll it out. And it's extremely beneficial for leaders. They always come back and say, wow, I learned a lot just checking in with people. So let me summarize some of these things with a run through of tactics. Len Nanjad sent me a note when he was registering. He said, how do we be credible, vulnerable, and authoritative all at the same time? And I found that question when I was looking for, you know, what to respond to at the end of this. I thought, wow, it ties in perfectly with these themes I had pulled together. How do you build bridges? How do you be the expert and continue this marketing work you have to do all the way along? Because I feel as change leaders, we're always selling to some degree, so folks get it. So first, building bridges, laugh more. So take time for those laugh breaks. And if you don't know the audience, you're just making a connection, point at yourself. You know, it gives you that bit of vulnerability. It creates trust by saying, you know, here's a mistake I made, or here's something funny that happened to me. It's a safe way to poke fun. Do those audience warm-ups, as I mentioned. Find creative ways to get people to participate and share a little bit, whether it's, you know, 2 truths, two lies and a truth? I don't know. 1 truth and a lie? One of you will tell me in the chat, I'm sure. I just ran a Go Fish contest. You'll have to ask me about it afterwards, in a socially distant workshop. So it's a bit of a strange thing, but it worked really well, and people appreciated how it helped them learn a bit about one another. Ask intelligent questions. Do your homework. So I read annual reports. I read the news about what's being said about an organization so that I can ask intelligent questions, particularly when I'm meeting with executives. Put your best face forward, especially if you're on video. Come prepared, because people do make judgments about you and your trustworthiness based on how you show up. So personal grooming, very important. Use the video option always. At Quest, it's hit and miss, so they advocate for it, but not everyone turns on video. I've noticed that just for myself, for the ones that do it, I feel a little bit more connected. So I always turn mine on. And they see what's in the background, what's on my shelves, and sometimes ask about that stuff. It allows me to reveal a bit more, and it strengthens relationship. What about marketing mantra? So be an informant. So you're sharing about the project at all times. Did you know what's happening over here? Did you know what's come out of testing? I want to share with you a bit about what came out of our last Scrum meeting. Help your clients thrive by keeping them informed. Know your value proposition. You should be able to describe your project and the benefits included in a minute or less. So having that elevator pitch ready makes an impression on others. Assume no one knows about the project. I used to go into meetings with executives and say, now tell me about what you're most concerned about the project. And I get a response like, can you review for me what some of the major changes are? And of course that was uncomfortable, so that can't happen again. So now I go in and say, Now, I know you already know these things. I just want to briefly recap, and I give them the top line elements that I want to discuss with them. They should know, but they may not. So you check in around that, allow them to ask any questions before you move on, and then off you go. One of my colleagues phrased it best as, all your tactics, even if you're asking questions, are interventions of some sort. So even when I'm running the interview, I'm gathering information, it's an opportunity for me to bolster, reinforce the messaging I want to get out. So I use every opportunity to reinforce that. To be the expert, I have 12 ways for you to demonstrate your expertise. And you can probably add a few more. I encourage you to share them as we go along using the chat area. But running the demos and presentations, bringing in experts helps reinforce that you've got a fix on what's going on, and make your partners look good. So, you know, compliment them, help them out where needed so they can deliver an effective presentation that will reflect back on you as well. Weigh in, you've got significant experience to share an opinion. Do share it, do it with respect, but you're there at the table for a reason. With my level of experience at the stage of my career, I've got lots of input around how to run testing, how to get the best results, getting organized, how we reach out, executive presentations, and all those things I feel very comfortable weighing in on because I understand the human dimension of all these tasks we have to carry out. Gather intel using polls, surveys, informal interviews, but gather that up so that you can be an expert when you're going into meetings. You got data. You can say, you know, speaking to 3 people that came out of these different business units, here's the trend so far. It's only 3, but it tells us something. It's an indicator. Communicate like a pro. So I mentioned branding already. That can be developed so easily and cheaply. Simplify your message. Midway through my career, I was still getting feedback of, Jeff, this is great, but it's too long. People won't read all this. So now I really aim at simplified, short messages. The longer it is, the less likely people will read any of it. If it's short, you might at least get a skim. If it's long, they may abandon it altogether. Leverage the available technology. So Zoom, we've got lots of ways to engage people using annotation tools. You can pull in stuff like Poll Everywhere. I demonstrated before we got started. Yammer, Slack, Teams, these are all tools available in the organization that I can use to build some community or interaction around for people to share. Build your network of super users. It may be appropriate in what you're rolling out, maybe not, but keep them engaged. That's been a struggle for many organizations. That we build them and then we let them kind of fall apart. But they can be so valuable between changes and as you're rolling into a new one. Leverage executive appearances and testimonials. So you can't do this all the time. People start to, well, it just has less impact the more you use a particular leader. So at significant milestones or where a particular message is needed or reassurance is required, bring them in and have them speak to that. And wherever you can, inject some fun. Change should not be all dreary and negative. So try to wrap some fun around that. Express appreciation. I'm thankful to my mother for giving me very good manners, but saying please and thank you, acknowledging what people have contributed. Everyone likes to hear that. Celebrate early steps and short-term wins. I often need a nudge because I want to keep moving. What's the next task? But stopping to say, wow, we've seen some good progress here. We've got some short-term wins, and acknowledging that are significant for getting people engaged and feeling supportive around change. Helping others along the way, and then repetition. Repeating your messages again and again can be extremely beneficial. So there's 12 ways to be an expert in delivering change. I hope you find those tactics useful. I'd summarize by saying, we find ways to walk with them, to recognize that our stakeholders are human, and so are we. We empathize with them and help them along the way. Change is indeed a contact sport, but it doesn't have to be direct. I don't have to meet every single individual, as long as I realize that at some level, we are all in this together, just like we're hearing about from our leaders in these pandemic times. Which takes us to our Q&A. So I'd love to hear your questions. As always, a reminder, there's lots of good stuff on my website you're welcome to leverage. While you are thinking about questions, here's a few that came in during registration. So Laurel asked, what opportunities for change will open up as a result of our new post-pandemic reality? Well, I think, first of all, I mentioned in an earlier session that we should be capturing the stories now of what people are doing to adapt, to remind them later, post-pandemic, of how they've been able to adapt in some pretty tough scenarios. I also think we need to give them a preview post-pandemic of what life will be like. So start sowing those seeds. The third bullet from Krista, how will we deal with the changes we're experiencing today when we come out of this pandemic, head back to the office? So many of our new normal day-to-day activities will be disrupted. We'll be commuting to work, dealing with the structure of the workplace. So first of all, I think it's wrong to say we're going to get our lives back and things will return to normal. Those are phrases that are dangerous from my perspective, because I don't think we'll be back to what we had before. Virus is not going away anytime soon. So in many ways, it will be a new normal. So giving them previews of what it may look like coming back to the office, where spacing at minimum is more required. Not looking at each other funny when we wipe things down after someone else touched it. So normalizing those kind of things, I think, is a big benefit. We can start doing that now. Second bullet, how do you convince leadership that change management is needed in today's world? Some folks are resistant. They see change as touchy-feely. I've heard that many times. Speak in concrete terms that matter to leaders. Change is not about making people feel good. It is about getting results. When a leader says, we're going to do this strategy, they're instituting change. They want results. They want performance. We are here to help them get that performance. We work on the people side to ensure we reduce risk and realize returns. I can have a whole conversation about change with the leadership without using the phrase change management. We just look to speak to performance and results. Final question there, how best to address and deal with individuals who are resistant to change and are positions that enable them to impede progress. And this is challenging. We do have them, folks that don't want to embrace change. So good question, Mary Lynn. What we do is learn more about what they want individually. So I've got to build a relationship with them, find out what's in their self-interest, and then connect my change to what they want. So if they have desires around status, around success, how can their involvement in my change make them look successful, or as leaders, or as professional, anything like that? So I need to know them personally, and then I connect my change to what's in their interest. So I don't see any other questions coming in. So a final slide. One more session coming up on remote leadership and resilience. I haven't booked it yet just because I've had a number of client requests coming in. I want to make sure I get those scheduled to meet their requirements. But I'm assuming next week I'll be able to run this final session on remote leadership. I had a ton of questions in this area, so that's why I put massive Q&A in there, and we'll go through some of your questions and concerns.